I have regrets. I have big regrets. Oh, God. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing some big experiments in here. I need to pull some patterns off of the original garments in my collection. We've been looking at original garments, we've been exploring them, and my plan has always been to reproduce some of them, and there's also been requests from you all to reproduce some of these garments. I need to be able to pull patterns from the originals. With that being said, I've never actually done this before. This is something that I've never really had to do, so I've never really spent time developing my technique with it, and so I thought it would be fun to bring you all along with me in what could potentially be a massive disaster. And just kind of see like what works, what doesn't work. Now, to make it fun, I have decided on two techniques to try today. The first one is actually from 1892, and I pulled it from a Victorian dressmaking book called How to Cut and Fit and Finish a Dress by Madame Vol. Don't ask me why she's got like a super Scandinavian sounding last name with the French intro, and it's an English book, but there you go. Whatever, no judging. Printed out the instructions. I haven't actually read the instructions because let's get a little crazy up in here. Whoa.
I also like to live dangerously.
But I thought that could be fun for us to kind of go through that together. Another technique I've set up and prepped here on the table is a more modern technique that I think will work really well for the way that my cutting table is set up. I think what I want to do is I want to use the same bodice for both techniques, and then that way at the end we can kind of compare the shapes that have been created to see like which, like how they look, like how similar do they look, how different do they look, how bad did they look. Isn't she lovely? Because I'm developing some Halloween plans. I think I'm going to use the surprise bodice from the very first video, Victorian unboxing. Pin tucks. They're just pin tucks and silk. That's, oh my God. If you're not familiar with that video, I will put it up. Here somewhere. I don't actually remember which side I need to point on because it's like reverse, and I thought I was picking at the right side and it wasn't last time, but it'll be up here somewhere so you guys can go and watch that if you haven't already. To kind of get myself warmed up with this, I'm going to start with the more modern technique and walk through that process, and then once I'm kind of in the zone, like then I'll do what Madame Lawful tells me to do. Let's get to it.
Holy voiceover time, Batman. So, I actually took this technique from an Instructables article that I've linked down in the description below, which I thought was actually incredibly helpful and very well written out, and I highly recommend it. Now, the reason I was able to do this technique is because I actually have a homosoap board as my cutting table. It's also known as the sound barrier sheeting at Home Depot, and it's a pinnable board, so it's basically like a massive cork board without it being made from cork. Also, a sort of best practice when it comes to doing a questionable technique on an antique garment. I fully admit that. I opted to use my Clover glass-headed pins that I got from Wawak that I've also linked down in the description below because they are super duper sharp and very, very fine pins. And so I figured they would do the least amount of damage or potential damage to the bodice using this technique, and I seem to be right. I have not seen any scarring or noticed any sort of damage from using these pins. The other thing that I did differently from the Instructables article is that I chose to leave the pins in place because I was using them as a way to anchor and kind of support the garment. I didn't want to risk having to really pull or push anything out with my hands and kind of just be as hands-off as I could be with this. So I figured having the pins to help anchor and support it in its position would be the wisest choice to do. I could be wrong in that, I don't know, but that was my thought process behind it.
Okay. I have everything patterned now except the sleeves. And I went to try to get an idea on how to do this with the pin method, and basically my brain has turned to Jello. And I don't know what to do, because this is not, it's a 2-piece sleeve pattern, but the second piece is so narrow and it's under the arm that it's really hard to get to. I can see the basic shape of it. I can pull measurements. I just don't think I can do this pin method for the sleeves, at least not this particular type of pin. I think if it was a normal 2-piece sleeve where you have the seam, you can pull it out and you can do that, I think it would actually work just fine. But because this Edwardian era bodice is so different in its sleeves, I just don't think it's possible. I'm also like completely brain dead at this point. So, and I haven't even done the 1890s technique yet. Maybe I shouldn't even try. Like, maybe I should just give it up and just come up with another way to get the sleeve pattern. But that kind of like defeats the purpose, right? Like, this point is to see, like, does this method work? Like, what method do I like? What method is the easiest to do, and things like that. So I need to try. I'm just want to take a nap. I'm so tired. Oh wow, look at that. Look at my hair. Like, guys, I'm so tired this week anyways, and I've just been kind of like slightly out of it like for most of this week, that I was like, oh well, this should be like fun, easy video to do, like no problem. And I have regrets. I have big regrets. Oh God. Long story short, the pin method works for the linings and things like that. It doesn't really work for the sleeves, at least not these sleeves. But these sleeves are also like super complicated, so there's that. Fun, yay. Look at me picking out the hardest thing to do right off the bat instead of like a nice, easy thing. Wouldn't that be so much smarter? Oh yeah. I am done with the laying it flat and pinning method. Now it's time for the 1890s method, which involves tissue paper and more pinning. Obviously pinning's not ideal, but at the same time, it's kind of like, it's the most exact way to do this. And part of the fun for me with this is I wanted to see how this worked, because this is what they told women to do in the 1890s, to pull patterns from bodices that they liked. So I wanted to see how well it worked. It involves taking tissue paper and molding it and pinning the tissue paper to the shape. And I'm gonna be following the instructions as close as I can. Let's see how this goes.
Madame Luffel actually walks you through every part of the bodice and how to pin with the tissue paper. However, to be really honest with you guys, I was so tired by the time I started doing this that I just had kind of skimmed the instructions, and then I just went for it. Like, I was like, let's just do this thing, right? But I did reference them as I was going along, just to kind of help me keep focused and on track, because there was a method to her pinning that made sense that I didn't necessarily know as I was doing it, and then I'd have to go back and fix it. Also, and I didn't realize this until I started filming this video, that Madame Luffel actually wants you to turn the bodice inside out before pulling the pattern, because that's just to make it easier. And while I think that's totally fine for modern clothes and obviously 1890s women pulling 1890s bodices, like it's totally cool, but since I'm working with an antique garment, I was not comfortable doing that and I wasn't going to do it. So I couldn't do the exact technique to its exact specifications, simply because I was trying to protect the garment as best as I could. Yeah, that wasn't gonna happen. However, with all of this being said, this technique for figuring out a dart, oh guys, this is genius. Like, this is really cool. So I think I will probably do that technique again when it comes to figuring out the size of the dart and getting a better idea of that, and then going and using other techniques.
Here is the questionable tissue paper 1890s pin method. I will say the one thing that worked really well, from what I can tell, is the dart shape. That just kind of, once I pinned this and just kind of pinched that up so it ended in the right place, it just kind of like popped into place, which I think is cool. You have to have like just enough tissue paper because this was just super in the way. But I think I was able to mark out everything with the pins, and so what I'm gonna do now, instead of cutting it directly because that's scary, is I'm going to roughly trace this out with pencil because that's safer, and then I'm gonna take it off, cut it out, and then we'll see how it looks compared to the other one over there, and that will kind of answer the initial question. Here's the tissue shape. Here is my shape. Let me get a little further back here. And so you can see that lining up there, we just have oodles. There's a whole inch and a half up here. The neckline shape is basically the same. It's just, this just goes out so much farther. And then I had a really hard time figuring out where the seam line here is because there's the bone, but mostly what I can see is that it's much straighter than what I was kind of drawing out here based off of this curve. But if you line that up and you pinch this in, you can kind of see how it works. I think the next step forward for this is to look at pattern shapes that are similar to this in drafting manuals and kind of see what makes the most sense. And it might be that this just needs to curve out ever so slightly a little bit more here to kind of get a little bit prettier of a shape. So I'm really happy with this method when it comes to figuring out the dart. And then that changes the angle here at the center front, which is what I saw in the original, like in the grain line. And I kind of did an estimate, and maybe it's this much, but it seems like it's much more severe. So having this cut on the straight, then this dart pointed in will angle it to create that bias. Honestly, this is probably, especially if you're dealing with darts, this method's actually probably better. I think I would have had an easier time if I hadn't had such a big piece of tissue paper to deal with. I think I'm gonna try it again to get an idea. The one thing I don't like about this is that I have no way to really support the garment, which obviously as an antique that is important, and I'm not doing right by the garment. I think what I want to do is, if I employ this technique in the future, I think actually what's better is if I actually create a pillow, like a tailor's ham, that is kind of the shape of my thigh, since that's what they recommend, and then I can lay the garment on a work table and have that underneath, make that pillow, and have that be a way to kind of roll pin essentially the pattern into place. All right, it's the moment of truth. Here's what I drew doing the pin to table method, and here is the very different pin in the round method. It's really not actually that bad. You can see this is just not as curvy as what I've drawn, and this shape here was me just trying to fix the line that didn't work out, and I just squared that off, and then I curved this out a little bit more. I think the biggest difference is just this up here. This part in the original bodice is a bit wacky anyways. It's kind of hard to see because it's stitched differently. If you are going to try this method, I recommend starting with something that is actually much more straightforward and basic to work with. I definitely did that thing where you think it's going to be fine and you bite off a lot more than what you can chew, and I picked the wrong bodice to practice with. Like, hands down, super wrong bodice to practice with. But with that being said, I post every Sunday, so if you like hanging out with me, go ahead and subscribe. I will see you here next week, and I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your week, and I'll see you then. Okay, bye. All right, Self, let's just take this from the top since that wasn't us anyways. No, I'm gonna, not happy with that either. Okay. Look at, oh, shit. So I probably will end up doing some voiceover here. So let's back up a little bit here. Get my whole head in the shot. Well, let me back that up. Wow, you know, no big deal. Just having a good time. Woo.